All right. Well, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Leslie Pendleton here on Tuesday, October 12th, 2021 with Dr. Jason Rosenberg to conduct an oral history interview related to the Machen Florida Opportunity Scholars Program 15th anniversary. So Dr. Rosenberg, thank you for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about your first generation story and how you learned about the Machen Florida Opportunity Scholars Program.
So I can't tell you what year it is, but now that you're telling me it's the 15th anniversary, I bet it was about 15 years ago, or maybe it's still a little bit more. So in 2006, President Machen and chairman of our board of trustees at the time was Manny Fernandez, came to me and asked me if I would participate in a trip that we did around the state to meet with donors who we had identified as having a potential interest in helping to fund first generation scholars. So it was through a series of these events that I think were in Jacksonville, Tampa, maybe one or two other cities, when we went on this tour, that we began to try to sell the idea of having our alumni and supporters of the university help to fund a first generation initiative. So I think that was where it really began.
So could you tell us a little bit about I know you identify strongly as a first generation college graduate. Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing, family, where you're from, and kind of how you ultimately came to the University of Florida?
Absolutely. So my family has, what I think of as the quintessential, well, that's not probably a good way to put it. My family has what I think is a great immigrant story to the United States. And my great-grandfather came from Russia. And the way the family lore goes is that he sold sour cream out of a barrel in the Lower East Side of New York in Manhattan. And I think, I don't know if you remember those Sam Breakstone commercials where that big guy was selling sour cream in a push cart in New York City. But I kind of envisioned that being my great-grandfather. And then my grandfather was a taxi cab driver and drove one of those yellow taxis in checkered cabs in New York City. And then my dad and his brother, my uncle, started a business in New York, and neither of them had the opportunity to go to college. As a matter of fact, my dad tells a story about being accepted to Juilliard. He was a musician. He was very talented, played 5 instruments, and would practice for hours a day on the subway going back and forth to school. But he was not able to, after getting admitted to Juilliard, able to go to college to pursue higher education because he needed to help work and feed the family. So we, my brother and my sisters and I, were the first generation in our family to be able to attend college. So it meant a great deal to us that we had these opportunities. And, my opportunities were somewhat limited. I remember it was September and the University of Florida used to do a rolling admissions process, as did many of the schools at the time. And I had applied to the University of Miami and the University of Florida. And quickly after applying, got acceptances to both and generous scholarship offers to both. And I had dreams of applying to all of these other fancy universities that cost a lot more money. And my dad sat me down and said, hey, which of the 2 free colleges to which you have been admitted would you like to attend? And I said, the one that's further away from home. So I came to the University of Florida, kind of sight unseen, knowing very little about the University of Florida, other than the fact that it was the oldest university in the state and it was well regarded. But at the time, it was a lot easier to get into than it was today. So it didn't quite have the prestige of a top 5 public university at the time, but decided to come to the University of Florida. And as they say, the rest is history. It's afforded me so many opportunities to pursue graduate degrees and then professional degrees, and then to do all of the amazing things I've had the opportunity to do. I kind of credit UF and the opportunities I had at UF with setting me on this trajectory. So the idea of sharing that with other people, especially with first generation students, was incredibly attractive.
So related to your experiences then as a first generation college student, what about those experiences kind of connect you to this program? I know you've told stories about sort of your UF experience. How does that kind of also connect you with the Machen program?
Well, I mean, it's funny to say this to somebody in fundraising, but to say it to somebody who's so connected to the program like you, the University of Florida prior to this program did not really have a compelling story that they presented to me in terms of what I should support with my philanthropic dollars. I didn't understand why you gave money to the University of Florida. I kind of thought maybe you were buying pencils or a professor was going to go on a research trip or something like that, but it really didn't speak to me. when this idea was conceived, the idea of taking students that deserved to be admitted to the University of Florida because they were academically qualified, but would otherwise be unable to attend. They wouldn't get to be Gators. They were smart, the smartest kids in their class, and they were talented. And these kids particularly had overcome these amazing obstacles. I didn't really think about consciously growing up that I was at some type of disadvantage because my parents hadn't attended college. And I don't think it really hit home until I came to college, and they really didn't have much of advice for me. You know, all of my friends, not all my friends, many of my friends who had been to the University of Florida, who came to the University of Florida and whose parents had been here and grandparents had been here, they already knew that they wanted to be in Blue Key and that they wanted to be in X, Y, or Z fraternity or sorority, or what dorm they should live in, or, you know, what you bring to college, other than yourself, I guess, and your, you know, your abilities and your talents. I had no idea. My parents kind of dropped me off and said, good luck. And so I didn't realize that was a disadvantage. For me, it was a blank slate. I was kind of excited about it. They weren't coloring my experience in any way and expecting anything from me. They just said, go do it. So I thought that was great. But this is a big place, the University of Florida. And if you don't have that background of people helping you and helping to pave the way and setting your expectations and telling you what's a big deal and what's not a big deal, you kind of are a little bit wandering lost in a, you know, a huge sea of opportunities and challenges, the University of Florida. So it made sense to me what you were trying to do. What we were trying to do is bring these really bright kids who wouldn't have had an opportunity otherwise. And the other thing I wanted these students to be is regular students. And to me, the definition of regular students is everyone is saying, let's go get a pizza. The kid who can pay for the pizza, you know, be able to buy their own slices. So scholarships paid for a lot of things, but what it didn't pay for was the ability to be a normal student, or at least that was my perception at the time. And I thought, if we can do this, we always talked about the delta, the difference between what Pell Grants pay and what Bright Future pays, and then what the full cost of the education is. That delta is going out for pizza. That delta is when you're homesick and you want to go see your mom or dad, you get to go home because you have, you know, either the money for a bus or gas or whatever it takes to get you home for a weekend. That's, to me, being a normal University of Florida student. And then, you know, a couple of little extra things aren't terrible either. I mean, I think Florida students ought to get to go to the Florida-Georgia game. And it might cost a couple $100 depending on how you go, but you got to go to that at least once, right? So if we gave them the extra money so they could go up to a Florida-Georgia game and get to experience the passion of what it means to be a sports fan at Florida, that was great too. So this made sense. This is something concrete I could wrap my arms around and say, I want to help these kids. And my family was behind the idea of helping these kids. And, you know, you see yourself in it a little bit, I think. But wow, what amazing young people they were when they first started. And, you know, I could tell you names and all I need to say is the first name. If I say Brandon, you know who I'm talking about. Or if I say, you know who they are and I know who they are. And these kids were amazing. And they were great ambassadors of the brand as well and of the concept. So it was really easy once we started finding students who fit the bill to then go out and be excited about what we had done, what we had started, and realize that there was so much potential in the program.
So you mentioned your family being behind it. I've observed that as well. Can you talk about, I've heard you say before that the Machen scholars you want them to be role models for your own kids. What can your kids learn from the Machen scholars? What have they learned? Well,
it's funny. We've had the privilege of interacting with these kids a lot. We've had them over to our home and had dinners for students. And my kids have seen us sign pledge agreements and give gifts and get some credit from university officials for having made a gift of X amount of dollars. And their eyes got really wide and they were like, Dad, could we really do that? Or Dad, I don't think my college fund is fully funded yet. What are you doing paying for other kids? And I said, well, these kids have proven something to me. These kids have the ACT scores and the SAT scores to get into the University of Florida. These kids were the best students in their class. My kids were filled with potential at the time, but hadn't yet done those things. So I said, guys, these kids are a really good bet. You do all the things it takes to make you into a good investment, and I'll invest in you the same way that we're investing in these kids. So they really did set a bar for my kids. And when you see kids getting 32, 3, 4s on the ACT and coming from home circumstances that aren't nearly as good as where my kids grew up, it really says something. These kids didn't have tutors for their ACT or their SAT for the large part. And they had to get, their one shot at the ACT had to be as good as my kids' third, fourth, or fifth. So it really was eye-opening for them, but maybe even more so for me.
I've heard Dr. Machen call you the original MFOS scholar. Now, obviously the program wasn't here when you were an undergrad, but can you talk a little bit about your relationship with the Machens and kind of his vision and maybe how his role has in the program has helped usher it through the 15 years?
Yeah, well, Bernie and Chris have been amazing. And their passion for the program just really is contagious and so sincere. When you're a university president, and I got to work with President Machen both before and then during my time as a member of the Board of Trustees. And presidents make unpopular decisions. That's kind of what they have to do. And a lot of the decisions that presidents make may be outside of their main area of interest because they're responsible for everything. So to see that switch turn when Bernie goes from talking about the issue of the day that you have to deal with as a university president to my scholars, these kids that bring out this passion in him, it transforms the way he looks at you, the way he interacts with you, because you could tell now you're doing something he's really excited about. And so that I've seen consistently throughout the 15 years. And I saw Bernie and Chris on a plane the other day, leaving Gainesville to go somewhere. And just, you see that look in Bernie's face when he knows that other people share his passion for this program. And I think we really connected well in that regard. So, when you're a trustee, one of your jobs is to critique the things that the president does or doesn't do as a president. And there have been times where, we haven't always been on the same side of an issue. But sharing that connection of loving these students and having a passion for keeping the doors of opportunity open at one of America's best universities is, I give him so much credit for. And he feels it, he cares about it, he loves it. This is not because his name is attached to the program, because at first it wasn't. It's not because he gets any more accolades. He already has the t-shirt of being president of one of America's best universities. This is because it means something. And it's true of him and of Chris. And to see them that excited and that passionate is beautiful, and really will be the thing I always think about when I think about what President Machen did for the University of Florida. There's probably a list that's way more significant in terms of moving us towards a top 5 university than this, but there's nothing more significant than the kids who've come through this program who wouldn't have were it not for what President Machen did.
Great. I have one more question, and then Deborah, if you have anything, and I know we're short on time a little bit too, Dr. Rosenberg, but this phrase, several things you've said over the years have stuck with me, but the phrase, the shift from hope to expectation, can you explain that a little bit? I know I've heard you say it several times, so I hope it still resonates with you, and explain what you mean by that phrase.
No, absolutely. It gives me chills. When we had the Florida Opportunity Scholars at our house, and we would have the opportunity to speak with them and spend dinner time with them and then have a little chat afterwards, I would always tell them the story about the fact that my parents hoped that I would go to college. And their parents, because they're the first person in their family, the first generation in their family to attend college, their parents were always filled with a hope that their child would go to college. And as a parent myself now, and as a parent yourself, that means a lot, that all the hopes and dreams that you have for your kid. But not all of those hopes and dreams will become a reality. So my parents spent a lot of time hoping I would go to college. And now that I've gone to college, and now that I've seen what that opportunity has done for me and what it's meant to everything that it's impacted my life, I expect that my children will go to college. And so I still kind of hope it, but I've come to expect it. And I don't know if that's fair to expect that of them, but it's the truth that college graduate parents expect their children to follow in their footsteps and do the same thing. So what you've done with this program is we're making a shift from hope to expectation. And I used to tell them it was in one generation, from my parents who never went to college and no one in the family ever went to college, to now 4 college degrees in my generation. And now every generation subsequent to that, we all just expect that our children will go to college. And so that amazing transformation of hope to expectation in one generation was what I told people this program would do. I was wrong. It turns out the scholars taught me something. It wasn't one generation, it was less than that. Because once these scholars got into the University of Florida, they expected that their siblings would too. So we were able to make that shift from hope to expectation in less than a generation. So we actually overperformed what I was selling. And I was so excited about that as I saw Florida Opportunity Scholars have their siblings, Machen Florida Opportunity Scholars, have their siblings attend the University of Florida. But then there's another story that I told them. And it's a story I told them about that kid. And I said, guys, there's that kid. I want to tell you who that kid is. That kid is somebody who is in one of your classes, or maybe a year behind you in school, or maybe 2 years behind you, or maybe they played on a sports team with you, or were part of an extracurricular activity with you. And that kid watched you at some ceremony at your high school get a presentation saying that you were going to be a Machen Florida Opportunity Scholar, that you were going to go to the University of Florida, that all the costs were covered. And that kid lived in your community, and that kid knew who your parent or parents were. And that kid knew your social circumstances. And that kid was in the same boat that you were. And so that kid sees you, and now you have a responsibility. Your responsibility is to get a degree from the University of Florida. Because if you fail, and a lot of people are rooting for them to fail, the people who are rooting for these kids to fail are the kids who didn't do it themselves, who didn't make the most of the opportunities they had, who didn't get the score on the ACT or the SAT, and really have no excuse because they were in the same circumstance. So the people who are rooting for you to fail, if you fail for them, if you fail, then that kid, the one who's watching you, the one who's using you as an example, will not believe that they can do it. But if you succeed, they might. And so not only is it your siblings, but it's that kid who is sitting in the class with you or part of that social group that you're in who says, you know what, if so-and-so can do it, I can too. So there is such a huge opportunity for the scholars to serve as role models. And I would say in part, there's an obligation. Because when you ask these kids at dinner, the opportunity scholars, when you ask them at dinner, what do they want to do? They say they want to give back. They don't understand they can give back right this second. And that's by being successful. And when they're successful, they can serve as that role model to all of that kids, if that makes sense. I know that's a lot of pronouns. But if they can serve as that example, then other kids will want to do the same thing. And so that's how they can give back right away. And then the other thing I tell them about giving back, which is, you didn't ask about this, but it's one of the things that kind of either gets me excited or kind of bothers me. I'm not sure which. But when the kids say they want to give back, I tell them that your job is to go be incredibly successful. And you define that success. So that success could be defined by money, or could be defined by passion for what you do, or could be defined for the number of people you impact. You define it however you want, but you go be amazingly successful. Successful people attract attention. Right? So if you're successful, people will look at you. However you define success, other people will too. And when they see you, part of what they're seeing is Machen Florida Opportunity Scholar. So you are giving back by being a successful whatever it is that you choose to be. So giving back doesn't have to be working for a charitable organization or working for a nonprofit or giving back financially. Giving back can just be being successful. You know, we talk a lot about the idea of philanthropy. And that kind of makes me a little bit nervous when you talk about these scholars, especially when you talk to them, because a lot of times when we do events, you, particularly Leslie, will say to them, hey, I want you guys to thank the donors in the audience because these are the people who helped to make this program possible, and everyone gives a nice round of applause. And I always try to correct you and say, I want you to thank the investors, because these guys are not, these men and women who are scholars are not a charitable project. They are not in themselves someone who needs a handout. What they needed was an opportunity. That's why we call it this. And the people who choose to give them that opportunity are investing. And I think it's been the best investment our family has made in this space because the return is incredible. These kids come, they are normal, healthy, happy University of Florida students. When I say normal, like they just fit in. They're just kids at UF. And they're here not because of a special program, but because they're special people who have special achievements. And so that makes them really exciting for me in terms of an investment. And what they can do to what the return on that investment is, the ROI, is their success that I talked about. And when they're successful, I couldn't be happier for having participated. And that is true. And that resonates with everyone that we've asked for money for this program. And I would say this has to be, if not one of the best programs that the University of Florida has ever asked its alumni and supporters to invest in terms of its return, in terms of how just the bang for the buck on what you're doing has been amazing. And so you in particular, Dr. Pendleton, deserve a ton of credit because you were really, if I'm the alpha FOS student or whatever Bernie calls me, you've got to be the person who's carrying the water the whole darn time. And so you took this from someone who didn't have a doctorate to someone who has a doctorate. Was your doctorate actually in this?
It's in higher education administration. Yeah.
What was your thesis on this?
The dissertation is about, successful first generation college graduates. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously this program has given you a lot in terms of your professional success and but you have given it so much. And so I hope that part of this celebration is a celebration of Leslie, because you have been a force that without you, I don't know that we would have continued to have the passion and just what you do every day. I hope you know that. I don't know if I said that enough.
Well, I appreciate that. Deborah, do you have questions as well? Or a couple, I know.
I have questions.
Deborah's the filmmaker, by the way. She's the documentary filmmaker.
I want to respect everyone's time. And boy, you've given me, this has been wonderful, Dr. Rosenberg. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of that great insight. And I couldn't agree with you more about Leslie. I mean, yes, we can, from the material we have, we can make a whole documentary on nothing but Leslie and Pendleton and how everyone loves her in the program.
She might deserve one.
We could do that. But I don't have any questions. I think you really given me this has been a great interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me participate. Anything I could ever do for the FOS program, I'm always thrilled to do. And anything I could do for Leslie, I'm always thrilled to do.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate it. Deborah is wrapping up the process for the documentary. It will premiere on campus on Sunday, November 7th here in the Rights Union. So Jason, I'll make sure that Holly has that information for the premiere, but we'll obviously send it to you as well after if you aren't able to make it on that particular day.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was good to see you guys.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate all of the kind words.